All right, everybody, welcome back to the Identity Jedi Show. Y'all know what it is. It's your boy, the Identity Jedi, also known as David Lee. And you know, we keep bringing that heat on this show. I'm trying to tell you, y'all are in for a treat today. Uh, I got my man's Jordan Burris coming in on the show. I got to give a real quick story about how we met. Then I'm gonna let Jordan introduce himself. So Jordan and I met at Identiverse last year. I was on a panel he was doing about really, I don't even know what the topic is. I just remember this. Basically, it was about like diversity and what we're doing with identity and how these applications are moving and how we really need to be watching how we're doing this because it ain't fair for some of us melanated folks. So I was actually in the audience, and every time like they were asking questions, I had to like keep from like jumping up and hopping like in their panel. So like yo, I got to come talk to him afterwards because he hit on a lot of things that I have been hitting on, and so from there we just kind of hit it off and we're staying in touch. And so today's topic is going to be about synthetic identity, and so I wanted to have him on the show to come talk about it. So without further ado, because that was a whole minute and 40 seconds worth of ado, I'm gonna let Mr. Jordan introduce himself to the people, sir.
David, thank you for having me on the show, man. And yeah, I think you definitely gave me a run for my money during that conference. So I'm Jordan Burris, and I'm the Vice President of Public Sector Strategy at Socure. Socure is an identity verification and fraud risk management company. Really, what we specialize is helping folks be able to prove who they are online, and we do so in a manner that is provides unmatched accuracy across the industry.
Awesome, man. And so the topic for today is synthetic identity, and I wanted to, when I started thinking about this, and I started thinking about the end of the year, I was like, man, I really want to write more and talk about a lot of this because I don't think it's not getting the love that it needs as far as like getting out there. And I know like if you're in the space, if you're following this and you're either one of the competitors or you work around the synthetic identity, you're like, no, I talk about this all the time. But like when you kind of step out, I'm like, I don't hear about this enough, right? And it's something that I think I like to say this is our bill coming due. This is years of data breaches and bad security and slowly getting our API security and everything else up to snuff to where I don't want to say easy, but it ain't hard to quickly come up with a very accurate looking fake identity, right? With a lot of the data that's out there. And, what are we doing around the technologies and things to kind of stop that? And so when I thought about this, I was like, yeah, I got to see if Jordan will come on the show and talk about this. This is his lane. This is his thing, right? I can come and I can come learn and get more information, but also the people can too. So I appreciate you kind of, jumping on and taking the time. So I want to get straight to it. Can you for people who haven't heard of this, right, or don't really understand it, can you kind of break down what synthetic identity is?
Yeah, sure. In a nutshell, it's made up identities that are being used to acquire services or goods or perpetuate asks, intercept government benefits, in particular from those that would rightfully need them or impact the bottom line, if you will, for corporate organizations. Really, it's been around for a few decades now at this point. I think back in 2000 was when they started to and it started within credit cards in particular, where they started to kind of, from a fraud investigation standpoint, identify and hone in on the fact that these synthetic identities were being used. And essentially what it was is, names of individuals were presented and a social security number was entered. And that number didn't match to that individual. And that really gets to kind of the flavor that we see today for synthetic identities. You have what are called manipulated. And so this may start with my identity as it exists, right? Maybe someone purchased my identity on the dark web, or maybe it was, me trying to come up and fabricate my own particular, but then you start to change pieces of that PII in particular, whether it be the social security number, whether it be parts of the date of birth that's associated with it, whether it's the email address I typically would use, et cetera. So that's that more manipulated version. And the fabricated is just completely made up from scratch, right? And so what happened what's happened for quite a while in the industry is that we've relied heavily on credit data or credit header data in particular in order to verify who individuals were and use that as almost a proxy, if you will, for their identity. The problem with that approach, when you do that, is that as credit profiles are created or as individuals go to apply for a credit account, credit history, I can tell from myself, at first when I tried to apply for a credit card many years ago, I was denied. Took me a couple times. Eventually, I got through. Right. Same thing happens with those synthetic identities, and so eventually they then start to perpetuate and promulgate throughout the market, and then they're used by will be malicious users or others to do things such as bust out, where they seemingly look like a normal person, but then all of a sudden they go use that $5,000 credit card purchase and they completely disappear because you can't track it to an individual, right? Or they're doing things such as potentially purchasing phones. That was one of the very early uses of synthetic identities. They would purchase phones, or they would start plans associated with it, because you used to give out free phones with various plans as they got started, and they would take those phones and then use them and sell them overseas in order to be able to reap the benefits of that. And then they found out that if you can tie that identity to a business, you can start fake businesses, get a whole big corporate plan going, getting all that money funneling. And so, fraudsters are intricate in the way that they operate. But yeah, it's evolved, continue to evolve for a number of years, and it really just takes a kind of a differentiated approach to go back and combat it.
Right. And it's interesting, right? Kind of hearing, just like I said, it's been around for a couple of decades, right? And it's not something, this isn't something new.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just as, like we see with a lot of things, as technology tends to mature and we start to do things, bigger, better, faster, right? That's the world of tech, right? We want things now, we start to see like how easy it is to kind of get all of this information together, and then what you can kind of take and do that. And it's interesting because fraudsters, I'll tell you, man, like, they're better business people than most business people. Like like the stuff that they put together and the way that they kind of connect things. You're just like, that's pretty legit, right? I mean, you can go, ask any pharmacist on the street corner. They'll tell you how it goes. But with that, like, where does technology like Secure come into the defense of that, right? Like, as you kind of talk to customers, and this is more than just like a consumer thing. This is going to affect businesses as well. Like, as they go into the fight to try and kind of understand what these synthetic identities, what does Secure come into play with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what really sets us apart is that we're building. We take a data science and machine learning based approach to this problem. And so every identity, as it's presented and the way in which it's presented, there's various signals of risk associated with it, especially when you're evaluating the PII and how it comes through in particular. And so where we specialize, where we have the opportunity, is that we've built these models that allow us to look holistically at consumers' identity as it is coming through, where I'm looking at not just their name, their social security number, their date of birth, all the various elements of PI, but I'm also looking at things like at the device that they're using, right? Their IP address, their geolocation, etc. And then we're able to paint a picture of risk and really hone in on the probability that it is a real individual and that it's not someone who is synthetic at the end of the day. A fun fact, and it's actually, I have the privilege to work with a number of really incredibly talented and intelligent individuals, including an individual named Mike Cook, who actually helped coin the term synthetic identity way back when. But he very recently put out a white paper through our company called State of Synthetic Identity. And I would encourage folks to take a look at that. It actually highlighted that the most common synthetic identity is Michael Smith within the US, based on our analysis and what we've seen across the board. And this is someone who's a white male predominantly within the US, around millennial age, has a Gmail account in particular. And far often than not, this type of profile is something that would come up and something that flies under the radar all the time. And so because of the approaches that we're taking with data science, we're actually able to basically look at the things that make up what are a real identity versus one that's synthetic, and be able to give that, again, that clarity to our clients, such that they can actually take action ultimately. And whether that is, double checking the accounts, whether that is being able to do what we call step-up authentication, where you're asking that identity to do more than what they previously would do by just submitting the PII in particular, to help provide that validity. And from there, they're able to help make that more risk-based or more informed decision, which gets them really to that accuracy that they're seeking, right? Is this the person I was intending to deal with from the beginning, or someone who was completely made up?
Right. And so you guys do this this is that time of authentication, right? So when somebody's first trying to attempt to access, anything, this is where like your technology kind of comes in and you kind of help proof a lot of that.
Yeah, so at the time of account opening, account onboarding, as we would call it, right? So
Right.
the moment, the initial time that you're inputting, you have that long web form, and you're going to fill it out, with all that annoying information. That's really where we specialize today, is being able to highlight that. But also beyond, we call that day zero, is the time the individual is first being introduced. But beyond that, there's a constant evaluation that has to take place, right? And so beyond day zero, if you think about it from the perspective of what happens when these profiles start to get updated, right? There's the opportunity to continue to re-verify who an individual is. We also play there as well to really help shine a light that, hey, this is the right information, or that someone wasn't kind of pulling the wool over your eyes up front and then, trying to change things in the back end later.
Awesome, man. So what is if you're talking to a customer, just anybody that's listening to this or kind of reading this as they look through, and they're saying, hey, look, this is definitely a problem, an area that we have, like, what are just some general steps? Like what's the right kind of architecture they need to start putting in place to kind of help, protect themselves?
Yeah, and so it's first and foremost, it's about getting kind of understanding and clarity about like how we got here, this problem in particular, right? A lot of this stems from the reality is, like I said, we've built a lot of identity verification today, or legacy approaches to it, based on credit header data, or the over reliance, if you will, on the Social Security number. And unfortunately, the only one who has access to that Social Security number is Social Security Administration. They very recently even came out with a service called ECBSV, electronic consent based Social Security verification service. But basically, the idea here was that they gave financial institutions the ability to query in a privacy preserving manner, but query the Social Security Administration's database to help confirm whether or not Social Security number was real and it was actually tied to the name and date of birth on record. I mean, there's good things associated with that, or the ability to do that check is helpful. The limitations, or I guess the problem with that, is that it was only open to the financial institutions. Well, if you go beyond financial institution use cases, whether it be telco, whether it be government benefits, et cetera, they're not able to actually benefit from this service as it's constructed, right? So what it ended up doing was, whereas financial institutions were getting better at being able to catch parts of this, and again, it's not perfect, other industries and segments are struggling.
Right.
Now, that's why you're seeing kind of the rise and promulgation of it. When we look to kind of what organizations can be doing to get better, right, it starts off with definitions and making sure everyone's on the same page about what that is. So there's far too often in our industry, not everyone is not talking about what the common definition is. Boston Federal Reserve has come out with a great definition of what it is to what synthetic identity is, or what synthetic fraud is in particular. And so we always do encourage folks to take a look there. When it's important to think about synthetic identity as something that can be stopped at the front door, and not something that you have to wait into your environment and try to do a purge later on. That's where we come in, of course, to be able to try to help from that standpoint. When you think about synthetic identity, or just the managing of identity in particular, right, has become part of your whole strategy in the way that you're evaluating and integrating ultimately out of the day. And then starting to do something called labeling, right, and starting to get better with that. Labeling is really the process of, after someone has opened in an account and you've tried to confirm that identity is real, are you telling the outcome associated with that transaction? Are you telling whether or not in the future that they were actually the right person, if you're kind of doing like a retrospective, or was it eventually synthetic? And the reason why that becomes important is because then through labeling, you can use predictive analytics tools, or machine learning in particular, to better help identify what factors were associated with what would be a good person or a bad person, and then build what, if you will, critical mass over time to look more holistically at solving this challenge. This is how we approach this today. And so we can take more of these insights from our customers and those who engage with, those who provide us these types of labels, to better train our models. And so we can identify, hey, this is really what synthetic identity looks like in practice, right? This is the trend, if you will, that everyone is employing for it, so that way we can do something about it overall. And so I would say, if organizations took these types of approach, they're definitely well on their way towards hoping to solve that challenge. And of course, working with companies such as ours, we're happy to walk walk them through what they need to do next.
Awesome. Okay. Look, of course you got to put the pitch in there.
Of course, always.
All right. So we're gonna take a quick break, come back, and then we're just gonna shift gears just a tad bit. This is mainly for me in editing, so I know where to cut. So
yeah,
real quick. Okay. One of the things I kind of want to get into now is there's this concept of like digital identity for the people, right? When we start to look at where we've come as an industry and technologies and where we're going, right? We are definitely living in the future, right? So if I think about when I was little and the stuff that I used to, the movies that used to come on and all the cool stuff they used to do with technology, right? I mean, with cell phones and video phones, like all this stuff now, right? But we're also getting to the point where we're truly moving identity as far as like authentication and authorization and what we can do with those services to the mass of consumers. And, it's not necessarily, I would say, we're maybe not being the best at doing that, right? Because we're rolling this out and not really understanding, the harm that this could do as we start to rely on more and more of these services, more and more. The biggest kind of example of that is the fiasco that happened around ID.me and the IRS, right? Where they were they wanted to roll that out. And for the most part, consumers are just like, the fuck out of here. like I'm not doing that, right? And so we look at that and it starts to kind of, start to erode the trust between the public and these technologies that are coming out there. So this is something that for me is near and dear to my heart that I wanted to get, your expertise on and your perspective on as, what this looks like as we start to roll this out, these services and what we can start to do better as an industry to make sure that, hey, like, we got to make sure we're covering a wide breadth of these things, right? Because what we start to see in a lot of this stuff is that, certain people get left out, right? And just put the nail in the coffin, like the more melanated you are, the kind of worse experience you have with a lot of these tools when it comes out to, being able to identify people. So talk to me a little bit about that and like what you see from the industry perspective and what your perspective is on how we can kind of safely roll these kind of technologies out.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely kind of a loaded area to talk through in particular. I mean, I'll start off by saying something and it's something I've always tried to say, right? Far too often in our industry and our market in particular, there's this rush to create and craft the 80% solution, right? Everyone follows the Pareto principle or talks about it a lot in tech, right? And you can solve for most of the use cases. The problem is, when it comes to identity, at least it's been my take for the longest period of time, it's that usually that 20% of use cases are the ones that are historically left behind and the ones that are always left behind because they're the hardest ones to solve for, but
Right.
They're the ones that require the most attention. And so, ultimately for the industry in particular, we need to be moving away from the notion of, kind of tech is going to solve this problem for us, because I think tech it broadly is an enabler, right? I work for a digital identity and fraud company today, and even today we say we don't have necessarily all the answers to all problems. We have a path in which you can get there, but it takes kind of understanding the use case and the individual much better. And I like to draw on examples from my family to the point they probably get tired of me doing it all the time, right? But during the height of the pandemic, I have a sister-in-law. My sister-in-law lives overseas, and her son is going here in the U.S. to university, to college. Had to fill out the FAFSA. Was not able to prove who she was online because of some of these legacy approaches that are being taken. She had to get on a plane, fly overseas. It was 16-hour flight, maybe with some layovers in particular. And then had to fill out a paper-based form in order to prove who she was with basically her government ID. Like, that's the failure of the system. Now, she had the means to do that, but many folks don't have the means to do that. And you can take that and extrapolate it to everyday use cases, right? When people don't get through the online channel today, they tell them to go wait in line, to go show up at an office, wait hours on end. in order to prove who they are. And if they have the time and the means to do that, great. If they don't, they say good luck, and they're kind of left out. And that's really what needs to change. And so, I mean, the way in which you start to change that is getting into a mindset and a culture where we're actually testing for impact, disparate impact at the outset of our solutions and like throughout the journey, instead of just relying on, I'm going to say marketing, to say that, you know, someone has an inclusive solution. That's not good enough. I want you to show me the data, show me the results, show me how you are able to break down those barriers for groups that can otherwise not get into the process, because otherwise, like, we're just going to continue to see the same issues over and over and over again.
Yeah, and it's you know, and I know this isn't necessarily like where, you know, Secure plays in. You know, they're more on the proofing side for the synthetic identity, but like in this same realm of, you know, discussing, as we look at what I'm going to term like taking these identity services that we all know and well in the business sector and the tech sector, but rolling them out where it's like, hey, I'm going to use this to authenticate this person to give them access to services. I'm going to use this to authenticate this person to figure out, is this person really who they say they are, right? A case that I bring up that I spoke at Identiverse a couple of years ago, you know, false positive when it comes to facial recognition for police profiles, right? And the wrong person getting arrested. Right. And we already know, like, well documented, don't at me, go research it yourself. We already know the flaws of the judicial systems when it comes to minorities already. So the process that if we're using something on a front end and we're using this technology to make, you know, authentications or trying to assert who someone is, right? Already knowing that system is already flawed. So if there's a wrong accusal in the beginning, like the process to get this person out is ridiculous. Right.
Yeah.
And you set things on a path. And so we're going down this road where we're depending on these things and pushing out this technology to, again, what technology is supposed to do, make things easier for us, be more accurate, to be less biased than human beings. And what we're finding is that it's as biased, right? Because human beings are created. And to your point, it's that 80-20, right? Like it's that 20% that's always the hardest, right? Ask any good developer, any lead architect, right? It's just, you know, it's that last part of it, which is why security always sucked for so long, because you would build the application and go, oh, wait, I got to secure it. Yeah, I'll come back and do that later, right?
Yeah.
And you figure out that I'll come back and do that later took you just about half as long as it takes to do all of the other application. Nobody wants to do it. It's the harder stuff, right? They want to go build the sexy features, but it's that part of it. And we are truly now in the digital age where literally everything runs through digital. I can run an entire business from my phone. Yep. I don't need an office space. I don't need anything. I can get email. I can write documents. I can sign documents. I can, like, all of that through your phone. Like, this is digitally how we can interact. So when you start to look at where we're going with that, it becomes imperative, right? Especially practitioners of this industry, that we are making sure that not only this we're holding those standards of what we're putting out there, but we're making sure that we've got to be the ones to call this out and say, hey, there's something wrong here. We need to do more. So, hey, look, yeah. Jordan, man, I appreciate you coming in. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, look, I couldn't agree more. And it really becomes important that we start to get this right from the beginning. You know, another anecdote that just quickly throw it out is that, you know, just to show where the bias gets put into our industry, just look at even at the U.S. Level. We break down many things such as name within the U.S. today because of the way we're accustomed to searching for things when we build our search algorithms and everything else for our databases as they exist, and we being the broader public, we have this bias towards Anglo-Saxon names and being able to search for those. You're South Asian, however, we have 3 to 4 characters. There's actually a problem in the way in which you deploy certain algorithms being able to search against that. And if you're not thinking about it up front and trying to solve for it, like, that entire part of the population is the one that's going to suffer. It's just an example, right? So I couldn't agree more. It's like we need to be better because it's here. And if you're not thinking about it up front, you're just creating a world of hurt for those as they're, you know, wanting to engage what could be the worst times in their lives.
Right. Yeah. And to that end, it's different now. This isn't just a feature that you'll get back around to later that doesn't really have an impact. To your point, like, we need to, I love what you said, like, start measuring impact. Like, no, like, you are, by doing this, you are shutting out a population from using the service, which depending on how that service is then used, you
Mhm.
are directly having an impact on their lives, right?
Yeah.
They are now able to do a specific thing because an algorithm or feature doesn't know how to include them into what it's doing, right? The the funniest and saddest thing I saw, and luckily this person had a really good sense of humor about it. I think this tweet goes back maybe about 4 years now. Um, but there was an Asian woman that had tweeted. There was a simple user interface that she was trying to log into, and it says, "Put in your last name." Her last name is LE, and it literally would not let her submit it because it says invalid last name.
Yep.
Last names cannot be less than 3 characters, and I'm like, really? So now you're
Yep.
telling this person, no, you aren't you.
Yep.
You can't access, you can't do, and there was no way for her to back out. She couldn't go any further. Like that was it. That was the end of it. Like I can't get past this because you believe that this is not valid. And so the only way to get past it is to give you invalid information so then you can accept it as valid and go back and change it later, right?
Yep.
It sounds simple. It sounds like one of these things, but it's like, to me, it wouldn't be such a big deal again if we weren't pushing more of these identity services straight into the consumer and affecting how they can get to their everyday lives. So I look at it as a call to action for this space. I've been in this space my entire career. I love it. And it's a time where, 20 years ago, if you were in identity, like you fought just to get anybody to pay attention to you. They were just like, well, I don't really care. Now we're talked about right next to security and a big part of security. And as we come into this next kind of digital age, it's now the time to really, truly be the rock stars and be out there and go, okay, we can really define how this works and help define the path for how customers engage with this and the type of services they can have. Sorry, I'm from California. That's my whole soapbox. We tend to do that. Us Californians, that's what we do.
Hey, look, it's good. I couldn't agree more, man. I couldn't agree more. It's what's needed this day and age.
Absolutely. Well, Jordan, man, look, I appreciate you taking the time, coming on, chatting with me for a bit. Look, you guys can reach out. You guys can find Jordan out there at Secure. He is an advocate for a lot of this stuff. If you have more information, specifically, if you're looking at this or reading this and say, hey, I want to find out more about that, obviously you can reach out to Jordan Secure. He'll get you to the right people and get that going. But until the next time, you guys be kind to each other, be good to each other, make sure to love each other. Catch you next time on the Identity Jedi Show.